Hello, everyone. I told you so. It's a term I absolutely despise, not because it gets used against me, but because my predictions are just so bad that there's no real joy in having my predictions come true. So let's talk about something I predicted regarding Bethesda Softworks and or ZeniMax Media about 2 years ago at E3. Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall and Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, for completely separate reasons, sit very close to the top of some of my favorite games of all time. Video games specifically. And while Skyrim has a far more active modding community, the two Bethesdas that existed during those eras, the Daggerfall era and the Morrowind era, are the Bethesdas that I think about when I speak out the company casually, when I'm not analyzing it and thinking about what it has become in more recent years. Now, when I said two Bethesdas, it's because a company can be thought of as a living body. Nobody works at a company forever, not anymore anyway. The era where you'd work at a single company your entire life and then retire, getting a full pension and using that pension to pay for your retirement and ongoing lifestyle, that concept is pretty much gone, with the exception of some large government contractors and things like that. But usually people jump from company to company, and this is especially true in the gaming industry, where a majority of the jobs are done on a contract basis. The fairly small Bethesda Softworks that made Daggerfall no longer exists. It nearly went bankrupt, making a failed space game called 10th Planet, after the lackluster release sales of Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard. After nearly going bankrupt, they were acquired by ZeniMax Media. This was the turning point, and things began to operate very differently. Morrowind was their last chance at remaining together as a company. And while people like Todd Howard said it gave them a new lease on life, other former developers would tell another story about a changing company culture and the worst job they were ever a part of. That's right, Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind was reportedly the worst job they'd ever done, which, some of that may be hyperbole, but I suspect it's accurate based on some of the things I've heard about Oblivion and Skyrim. Either way, Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind was a resounding success from a product standpoint, and is one of my favorite games of all time. But from that point on, the new Bethesda game studios committed to only producing one game at a time, as to not overreach as they previously did and put themselves into peril. They made that statement. They would no longer be producing many games at a time. That's why Oblivion gave way to Fallout 3, and ignoring New Vegas, which was made by a completely different studio, Fallout 3 gave way to Skyrim, and that gave way to Fallout 4. I looked at Skyrim initially. I was extremely impressed with the superficial elements to the game, the graphics, the voice acting. Those things went through a technical leap beyond Oblivion, and those things in Oblivion made a technical leap beyond Morrowind. However, as they progressed, there were some alarm bells that were going off. They were very, very faint in the background, but it was them removing stats and streamlining the experience for a wider audience. Basically, I was part of the core audience. And so as they began to streamline everything, I felt the experience getting more and more shallow, getting less and less technical. In other words, the things I liked about it were being thinned out. And over time, it became a very, very casual experience for a very, very casual audience. People make jokes here about filthy casuals and, dumbing down, but they aren't necessarily wrong if they are part of the core demographic, which is not the main demographic they're going after, because we've established the gaming industry is not content to make some of the money, they have to make all of the money. And that's why these games are getting changed over time to appeal to a wider and wider audience. The puzzles in Skyrim, for example, save one of the DLCs, can all be done by a child, by matching animals. This is the sort of thing that they do on public access television, Sesame Street, things like that. I'm not going to get into the lore about why the puzzles are that way. I'm just going to speak from it from a game design perspective, where they had the Hall of Stories and they had these pictures, but they realized that those pictures on the walls were too complicated for people. So they put the symbols on the actual claw itself, because as a former developer once said, Todd Howard is the kind of guy who wants to run in with a two-handed axe and chop things up and see how cool he is. Whereas the other people in the Morrowind team were more RPG-centric, but at the end of the day, you do what your bosses tell you. Thankfully, Morrowind had a creative director who existed between the project lead and the rest of the people. His name was Ken Rolston, and he filtered a lot of Todd Howard's ideas, or at least that's what I've been told. Whether that's true or not, I wasn't there. Either way, to get back to the point at hand, I didn't like the fact that a lot of the niche things that I wanted out of an RPG were being stripped out of Skyrim, to the point where role-playing is something you did because it wasn't really supported by the game proper. You had to run this little fantasy in your head because the game didn't shape and sculpt what kind of character you made. You had to actively work against the system as it was laid out in order to roleplay. This is both in Oblivion and especially in Skyrim. But still, at this point, the alarm bells were really faint. More recently, they opened a support studio in Montreal and started working on an undisclosed project. This is when alarm bells started to get a little bit louder because, again, they said they were going to be just one studio. But when it was made clear they were a support studio, well, that's okay, I guess, because BioWare had a support studio for years before they were completely corrupted by EA. And these support studios aren't harmful at all because they bring in talent that isn't natively available in the main studio. It's better than having contracted work over the internet because you can have people from a different location, aka a different pool of human resources, under management. Now, the management has to obviously communicate over the internet, but it makes the creation process a lot easier. So I didn't even think about the support studio in Montreal being any kind of alarm-worthy news. However, things started to go south when the hashtag BE3 was being touted around about 2 years ago at E3. The alarm bells got louder. That's the time when Adam Sessler and Morgan Webb, those people from the video game review show X-Play, they were misspeaking about the Bethesda games and in general, making themselves look rather foolish, like myself on this video, obviously, because video games are serious business, trollololo. But seriously, when they were pushing the hashtag really hard, they were like, we need this to go viral. We need you guys to do hashtag BE3. Hello, fellow kids. We need you to do this thing because you like our stuff. It's the idea of trying to force a meme onto the internet and make it viral. It doesn't work that way. As many marketing firms will tell you, at least the ones that are honest, there's no magic switch to make something super popular. Either way, this was the moment what I'd like to call full corporate. Don't get me wrong, Bethesda/ZeniMax have been corporate since Morrowind. Now, during the Arena era, Elder Scrolls 1, they were just a bunch of people working out of someone's house. And then in Daggerfall, they were a fully fledged studio, but they were still just a bunch of people who knew each other, and they hadn't yet become this corporate entity. But by the time the ZeniMax buyout happened and everything, they were full-on corporate. And it shows, because games as an art form gave way to games as a product. But during that Morrowind era, this is when the founder of Bethesda, the guy who started it all, got kicked out of the company by ZeniMax, and he had to sue to get his severance package. But at that point, when they were doing the hashtag BE3, they crossed a threshold there, where they went from just being that business relationship with the consumer to, hey fellow kids, would you like to, hey fellow kids, you like our products, right? Well, come on over here and let me show you what we've got. Cross that line from being professional to creepy, something I do all the time. I created a video at the time declaring that we need to keep an eye on Bethesda, and that Bethesda / ZeniMax was well on its way to becoming EA. The name of the game here is recurring income, you see. This idea was first really hit upon with the Elder Scrolls Online, chasing the World of Warcraft subscription model. I pipe on this many a time that ESO was, in its original alpha state, just a WoW clone with auto attacks and very, very basic World of Warcraft style mechanics, and it grew out of that into an Elder Scrolls-like experience. ESO is not a proper Elder Scrolls game, and it will never be, because it's done by a different studio, and it's done in order to chase that online model. And I did a series called What If Elder Scrolls Online Was Good? ESO fans usually get pissed during the first half of the episode and rage quit because, you know, I talk negatively about ESO, and then I build up my own version of ESO in my head. That usually enrages fans, and they leave a nasty comment, and that's fine. But it's a 3-part video series where I talk about what if we had made it a sandbox similar to the Elder Scrolls games, similar to, say, the older Dark Age of Camelot, similar to, say, Asheron's Call, or the old original EverQuest, or the Ultima Online. What if we took that older style of MMO, the one that is not a guided, crafted experience, and just throw players into Tamriel, giving them a basic goal and giving them very specific targets, as it were, that sculpt their gameplay, but then ultimately letting them do what they want. This does not follow World of Warcraft's model, ergo, it will not make money. When people tell me, well, the things you hate about ESO are just what make them an MMO. You've clearly never played the old-style MMOs, the ones that fell out of favor when World of Warcraft picked up the RTS community and then picked up several other communities and made itself into this overbloated behemoth that everyone's trying to copy. But we'll do another ESO video a different day, because the Alinor expansion pack was announced, or Somerset Isle, whatever, and the Crystal City of Alinor is now just a bunch of stone buildings, so we've got things to say about that, but we'll do them in a separate video. Either way, my ideas about what Elder Scrolls Online could have been aside, it took them a very, very long time to stabilize ESO's population. They did it by abandoning the Warcraft subscription model and going to microtransactions. The game boasts over 8 million purchases, but that doesn't represent a player count that fluctuates wildly between release cycles, like any MMO. Either way, after ESO stabilized in terms of population, I'm told from a former employee that it was still far below original expectations. And this is something they will never publicly acknowledge. A good chunk of Elder Scrolls fans did not convert to the MMO as they wanted. This is because despite having the Elder Scrolls name, an MMO is a very different beast to a single-player adventure game. So they replaced the subscription model with loot boxes, in the beginning reasonable crown store outfits and things like that, but it became increasingly ludicrous over time, to the point where you can pay over $100 for a castle that is instanced, meaning you don't actually own it, because, say, 1,000 other people, 10,000 other people may buy the exact same castle. It is the perfect example of recurrent spending options. They go on to release dungeon DLCs and more. Again, it would be its own video talking about how ludicrous the Crown Store became over time, and how good DLCs like Orsinium gave way to poor DLCs that bank on nostalgia, like the Clockwork City or the Falkreath expansion. Although they don't want you to use the word expansion, they want to separate into chapters and DLCs, because they want you to know that the game is progressing with each chapter. And the DLCs are just more content that you have to pay for each time. We're going to fast forward a little bit. This is when Dishonored 2 was announced. This is when Doom was announced. This is the general era of things. But during this time, because Bethesda announcements are very close to their releases, when we got very close to the release window, Bethesda made the statement that they would no longer be releasing games for reviewers. This is something I don't really care about. I mean, if a game developer doesn't want to release their content early to specific parties, that's fine. I'm 100% okay with that. However, Bethesda lied. They said that they wanted everyone to experience the content at the same time, reviewers and players alike. That usually indicates a lack of confidence in their material, that they just want to get people's money before negative reviews come out. But either way, besides what that implies, what it actually comes down to is they gave out the special edition to Skyrim and various other things early to very specific YouTubers, people who they're influencers, people who would speak positively about the content. A couple of them I actually consider to be good friends, so I'm not going to trash talk them or anything. They clearly love what they love. It makes the company into bold-faced liars, ones who will say on the face of it, we want everyone to experience at the same time. Hey, you'll speak positively about it. Here you go. You know, but they don't actually say that to the person. They've just confirmed that this person tends to say positive things, so we're going to give it to the people who say positive things, the people who will promote our product in the right way. It's their legal right to do it, but it is a bold-faced lie. And when a company lies, we'll never forget it. I will never stop talking about it. That's when I pretty much said, you know what? They're removing the elements I like in video games. You know, the modding is still really good, but we've got a problem here. And that's with the company's change in direction, the fact they lied. And that's where the alarm bells got louder. Then, fast forward further to the Creation Club. They had tried to do a paid mod system, which was an open marketplace. They absolutely refused curation tools. This is important. During the original paid mod system, Valve offered them tools with which to curate and control the quality of the mods on the platform. Bethesda's absolute condition for this deal going forward, the paid mod system on Steam, was that there be no curation. So Valve just said, you're the developers, you do your game in the way you want. So that's where all of the stolen mods came in. That's where all of the ridiculous mods that did practically nothing or were guaranteed to break your game but cost $10 or $15 came into play. It was absolutely absurd. The rage against the paid mod system was huge, and it absolutely, positively deserved all of that rage. Mostly because it was a full-priced game, and I was told the specific origins of the paid mod system, which were altruistic. The idea that all of these mod makers, we can't legally let them profit off of our work, because that would throw our trademark into complications. There'd be discrimination suits if we told some people they couldn't profit while we let others, do it on the sly. There's all kinds of problems with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to, let these mod makers be able to make money off of it. And the marketplace will decide what these mods are worth, so on and so forth. That was the original concept of the paid mod system. And it got twisted up over time, dealing with the suits above, and I'm just told that the final version of the paid mod system is not the version that was originally pitched. I am unfortunately told nothing about the origins of the Creation Club, but it appears far more cynical in its origins than the paid mod system was, where again, the idea in its original foundation, in its original pitch, was altruism. We want to help the mod makers, and then we can justify that by getting profit on the side. That was the concept of the paid mod system. This is very clinical, very business, we want to make a profit, and we can contract these mod makers to do it. That keeps goodwill up with the mod makers. It actually split the community horribly, and caused the mod makers who did get accepted to receive all kinds of hate, which is unfounded, really. I mean, if you want to be a contractor, you want to submit something, that's fine, but their quality standards, what they actually put into the game, is blatantly not DLC, not sizable chunks of content. These are micropayments, microtransactions, the kind of thing you'd expect to see added to a mobile game. This is the Creation Club in its release, in its initial offering, what's being offered now, is very clearly cynical in its nature, just a cash grab. And I think anyone who actually examines the Creation Club in detail can see it for what it is. Either way, at this point, the support studio in Montreal updated Fallout 4 and released a Skyrim Special Edition in order to support the Creation Club on both models. At the same time, they hid the original Skyrim on Steam and deleted the ability to purchase the Legendary Edition bundle entirely. You can still buy the original, non-special edition version of Skyrim on Steam, provided you know where the Steam page is. You actually have to type in the URL manually because the search box no longer shows it on Steam. Buying the original edition of Skyrim is important because not all people's computers, especially not low-end hardware or old laptops, they aren't capable of running a special edition, but they're still able to play regular Skyrim. So what happens if your Skyrim gets deleted? What if your disk gets broken? You can get the original version. Very clear, their goal is first and foremost to expose you to the versions of these games with recurring spending models, where you're able, as the player, to go and buy this new stuff, and you're able to buy this new stuff, and so on. And the idea is they won't have to make major changes to the game. They'll just release these little modules that you will buy. I've made 3 videos on the Creation Club. One when it was announced, another when it was a little bit closer, and one after it came out. I will leave any other statements or things regarding micropayments and stuff like that out of this particular video. I'm just going to say that they really should have taken the TF2 model with this, made Skyrim free to play. Then I wouldn't care what they added to the game, because if they went ahead and made it free to play, then those microtransactions are justified. Being exposed to microtransactions is the gateway to entry for a free to play game, and I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely okay with that. But Skyrim isn't free to play, Fallout 4 isn't free to play, so those microtransactions, those micro payments, those little pieces of content, which are not substantial chunks of content. They aren't new areas. They aren't new adventures. They're just tiny little additions to the game, not worth their purchase price. What we have here with the Creation Club is corporate greed. In its current state, it's a very bad proposition for everybody. The micropayments, I'm told, were very successful with the PS4 users that are gated out of proper modding and can only use the most bare bones of mods, those without BSA archives or external graphics, sounds, plugins, anything. So the problem this poses, I think, is for the future. It will encourage Bethesda to release future games with incomplete modding support. I'm talking about Doom's snap map feature. If you look at the old Doom, they released the freaking source code for it so you can make your own whole version of Doom. And the old version of Doom still makes sales to this day. If my worries come to pass is anyone's guess. But if we look at the PlayStation 4 and the Creation Club's success, I'm predicting the future for modding games will be locked into the Bethesda.net platform, and official creations will be advertised there where you can buy them. So the paid modding will be right there beside the regular modding. Again, I'm hoping I'm wrong on this point. I'm hoping I'm wrong on all these points, because bad predictions are best when not fulfilled, when not made reality. I don't benefit from being right in this situation. I benefit from being wrong. So let's hope I'm wrong. With Elder Scrolls Online remonetized through the Crown Store, Skyrim and Fallout 4 remonetized through the Creation Club, we now look to the future. Bethesda opened a new studio, and this is where the alarm bells were pretty damn loud. In the past, Bethesda had expanded aggressively and nearly bankrupted themselves to the point where they were bought out by ZeniMax Media, as I said earlier. When they were bought out by ZeniMax Media, it was well understood point that they would only have one team from then on. They wouldn't make the same mistake, and they treat their properties with more care. The Montreal studio was a support studio, never actually developed games. But this new studio is different. This is an actual game studio under the Bethesda Game Studios hood, meaning they're going to be, once again, having multiple teams going back to that original expansionist philosophy. Beyond that, we can only speculate. My guess is that this is ZeniMax, the same ZeniMax behind the recurrent income models, the same ZeniMax that created ZeniMax Online Studios to create ESO, the same ZeniMax that had Bethesda Softworks, the publisher, license out its properties to Direwolf Studios to run the card game Elder Scrolls Legends. Unlike other game studios, I don't have any contacts in the current staff in Bethesda Game Studios. But if what I heard about other studios in the industry over the years is any indication, my guess is their corporate culture has shifted significantly. Supporting this is the fact that another studio ZeniMax owned had its live services division merged into Bethesda Game Studios, specifically the Fallout 4/Skyrim team. This is important to understand because live services are the new industry buzzword when speaking to investors and members of your board of directors. A video game is something you develop and sell, a product, but a live service is something you develop and reap the rewards of into the foreseeable future. The live services team being folded into Bethesda Softworks or Bethesda Game Studios can only mean one thing. They are producing a new game, or won't be producing a new game, I should say. They'll be producing a live service to sell us in the image of a game. All of the toxic, corrupt business practices that have taken over companies like EA, Ubisoft, Activision are right here now at Bethesda. Games as an art form died early on, and we've been inching closer and closer to a homogenized product that nobody in the core audience of the past can relate to. There's a reason why classic Fallout fans looked at Fallout 4 and said, this is not what we want. Like, you've stripped away everything that made us like this thing. And you will have people who will love Fallout regardless. And once properly modded, because the Bethesda engine has proper modding support, you can make this game amazing still and pretty fun, but it will never be what we originally wanted it to be, no matter how much modding we put into it. And that is sad. When you look at Elder Scrolls 2 and 3, you look at all the things that were streamlined and simplified going into Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind is an extremely simplified version, when you disregard the story, of Elder Scrolls 2. And then Elder Scrolls 4 is a very simplified version of Elder Scrolls 3. Elder Scrolls 5 is practically just for little kids at this point. Yes, you can cut someone's head off. So let's look forward to watching E3 together and watching the live service Bethesda Game Studios, what they have to show us. I'll probably play it. After all, I'm part of the problem. So is Bethesda/ZeniMax EA yet? No, not yet. But they're following the trajectory just like I pointed out at E3 2 years ago. And when you look at any one of the things they've done in a bubble, disregarding everything else, then I guess it's okay. But remember that actions compound upon one another, and we need to look at everything the company has done in mass. And it's not painting a good picture. I think that their new studio has the potential to put out really good Elder Scrolls and Fallout games more frequently, something I would love. I would love to be idealistic, like one of my friends who has recently put out all these speculative videos about what Bethesda's going to be doing. I want to have that childlike wonder, but it's being weighed down by everything I know is coming and what I value not necessarily being what he values. If this new studio stays away from the live service model entirely, which they're not going to do, and produce actual video games instead of live services that are packaged as a video game, it could be amazing. I would love to see that if they kept away from the live service model. But again, live services division was folded into Bethesda Game Studios, so my predictions are dire. Only time will tell. Let's keep an eye on the future, shall we? What do you guys think? Leave a comment and tell me. Thank you all for watching. Check the links on screen for more content. I'll see you next time. This is one of the barrier towers. Oh, this is not good. Okay, here we go, everybody. Ebony greatsword. There's a lot of dead Panel White Strike! Oh! Fuck! Panel White Strike just went